sure my audio level is appropriate, and be good to go here in just a moment. Alright, get the ARES Region 4 and 5 digital net going. I'll ask for check-ins. If you'd like to ride along with us and listen or contribute anything, we appreciate you checking in. And we're going to mix it up a little bit tonight. We've been talking about packet for quite a while, and we'll probably touch on it and kind of recap where we've been with it. And then I'll plan on not talking about it again for the rest of the season, but kind of mix it up, make it a little bit more interesting. So we'll move on to something else, at least for tonight. And we may still touch on some packet stuff tonight, depending on where everybody's at with that. So check-ins for the ARES Region 4 and 5 digital net. Call now. This is K0JSC.
This is W0OJW.
And 0 OBV.
Alpha Charlie 0, Kilo Quebec. I am just going to lurk tonight.
KC2VJW. KE0 DMS, Randy. KE0 MOQ, Chris.
Okay, let me acknowledge who I have. W0JW and 0OBV, AC0KQ lurking, KC2VJW, K0GMS, K0MOQ, and it is okay to lurk. We just like to know you're listening, so if you want to check in, that's fine. If not, no big deal. We'll get started here in a moment. Let me just take another look for check-ins.
K0DMK.
Kilo 8, Juliet Tango Kilo. Start off with copy K0DMK, KHATK, and K1DDN. I'll take another look for check-ins in a moment. I've said that every week, but we'll try to remember to stop and actually do that. So we generally focus on, or at least feature modes that are appropriate for EMCOMM. Tonight we'll talk a little bit about packet, at least what we've done a little bit later, but we kind of want to move into some other things right now, and I think Ben and Willem and I will get together and see if we can, and maybe Jim, I'll put you in that email chain too, see if we can do a little more concise demo of packet WinLink, all that BBQ, all that stuff, and try some things and kind of illustrate what you can do with it. If we haven't driven that point home so far. So let's jump right into it here and talk about some of the digital voice modes. And I think most of you on the list already know this, but we're actually on one of them. It's analog when it comes out, but it's all linked via IP, and so it essentially under the hood it's completely digital. So, and we can, with digital modes, we can do all kinds of cool things. If you're watching, and for those that you don't know, go to youtube.com, and the search bar, when you get there, type in my call sign. I finally created a channel that actually has my call sign, and you'll find the live stream. So I'm just going through the status page, which most of you have probably seen many anytime. Gives a lot of control over the system. If you have a login, you can connect and disconnect things and see where traffic is coming from and put stuff into a receive-only mode if we wanted to. If we wanted to just listen to a particular thing, repeater, remote base. We have some remote bases. There's the one that's down in Pueblo, and I can control all the links and link to any one of these frequencies and connect it up, and then we become part of another system. There's also two in Denver. That's one of Mike's, and those are all the things there. He's got two. He's got a 2-meter and a 70-centimeter remote base, so we've got access to both bands. And all these others are, I mean, they're all nodes, but some of these are just hubs. They don't have any radio stuff attached to them. Clicking through kind of fast, but here's the one that Jeff in Ohio is connected to, and Jay's repeater out in Crete. And then this hub is usually where I connect all the local stuff. So, anyway, digital. It sounds like analog because it is analog, but it's all linked and controlled via digital means. So, there's one mode that is good for EMCOMM. I was kind of expecting Jay to be here when I start talking about D-Star. He'll probably show up. Hi.
Oh, he's here and checking in. N0 PKT.
Alright, I'll put you on the list. Anyone else will pause?
Please leave a few seconds between transmissions to allow everyone to join in.
W9CE.
And we got Jeff, W9CE. If you're watching, you'll see me click back and forth. It could be a crutch, but I use the status page actually heavily if I run a net or if I'm doing something and I'm in a position where I can look at it. Sometimes running a net, you can see when somebody's doubling, or if there's a weak station, you know where they're coming from, and you could possibly suggest another repeater if you know kind of where they are. So it can be helpful, not all the time. Anyway, here's another digital one. We talked about this last year. I won't go real heavily into it, but tickets. I've been trying to use this a lot more for our local nets and events. I used it for Skywarn Recognition Day. I don't think I kept it as current as I really wanted to. It really helps to track people's time. If you actually have everyone in the roster and dispatch them to some incident or event or whatever, it helps you to track their time as long as you're diligent about clearing them from the incident after they're done. And for our monthly reports to the Colorado section, it actually helps me get, not that the time, man hours have to be perfect, but I like them to be as close as they actually are. Give everybody credit for all the time that you put in. So we try to track these, and I haven't actually dispatched people tonight, so I gotta kind of figure out who's on the list and just add it up, but it's an hour for everybody. So there you go. There's another one that we won't get into really heavily, but let's move into this one. Let me reset. K0JSV. As it relates to EMCOMM, kind of a mixed bag, I think. A lot of these modes really heavily rely on the internet. D-Star would be one of them. I'm not aware of a way to link D-Star, say, on a private network. I mean, you could use a local D-Star repeater with other local users and you're not using the internet. I'm not against using the internet, but, you know, you reflect back on Puerto Rico where they basically had nothing. I think a lot of times we got to kind of think in that stay in that mindset of the internet internet's a great help, but a lot of times, if the internet is available, they may not need us to help them because they have the internet. And during a disaster, they're going to call probably, maybe for other things, but you're going to get a call if infrastructure, internet, telecommunication is down. So to surround the system based on internet linking, if it fails, it's really hard for us to do anything. Not that you can't use it as a backup, just have a contingency, I think is where I'm going, but we'll talk about some of these. So D-Star, and I can entertain comments too if anybody knows if there's a way to link that privately. I don't believe there is, but these days there could be. DMR, obviously we can link it privately. RMHAM and other groups do that over the backbone. Doesn't have to talk to a server out on the quote internet to do what it needs to do where D-Star does, at least for linking purposes. Yaesu System Fusion, I'm not positive. Jay will speak on that, I'm sure. And P25, this is what public safety uses here in Colorado. It's generally 800 megahertz, but you can use it in a conventional mode where it's still digital. It's not trunked like the state uses. And this modem that and I'll talk about that in a second, supports that. I've not played with it. I haven't enabled. I don't have a radio that does it. There isn't a quote ham version of a radio that does P25 that I'm aware of. You'd have to buy an old Motorola something and then get the software and be able to program it, yada yada yada. But one on the bucket list to play with. This is a daughter board, I guess, if you will, that plugs into the top of a Raspberry Pi, and there's some different variants and flavors of this. And then you connect it to an analog radio, either a transceiver or a transmitter and receiver if you want a full duplex repeater. Half duplex, as it were, I guess. But caveats to this thing that I'm starting to find is that the receiver is relatively deaf. It doesn't have good ears for weak signals, and I haven't had a lot of time lately to bang away at it, but we've been monkeying with this thing for a while, and it does work, and it works well, but I'm usually standing on top of it. When I get out at range a little bit, it doesn't do such a good job, and so if you're ever considering buying one of these, keep that in the back of your head. Jay's using a different device that does a similar thing, and let me talk about it, and then I'll kick it over to him. And this is the MMDVM, multimode digital voice modem. What I'm using is a kind of a variant of this. The original MMDVM needed to be connected to an Arduino, which then in turn needed to be connected to a Pi. So there was an extra bit in there. It's still fairly inexpensive. And then there's something called the Spot Out that's just a little hotspot. There's tons of different. There's got to be 15 of different things you could do if you wanted to do any of this stuff. I didn't have these in order, but there's the open spot, kind of a nice little package. It's a little hotspot. Give it an Ethernet connection and power, and allows you to do the same things. Like I said, it doesn't have a lot of power. It's, I think, 10 milliwatts. Not going to give you a lot of range, but these, from an EMCOMM perspective, if you had a mesh network or a backbone network or some network connectivity, believe natively right out of the box you can link these things together. So you could have a small coverage footprint between a couple of shelters, and it wouldn't broadcast stuff all over the county. It would just be almost from building to building. There may be an advantage to that, I don't know, but I'll pause and let Jay speak on this if he chooses to. Actually, all three devices. K0JSC.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to talk a little bit about OpenSpot. I didn't know if you wanted me to actually... do you have things linked up, Jeff? Do you want me to talk on it right now?
You could do that. I can put this in scan and go to the status page, and we should be able to hear you.
Well, it's up to you. You know, however you want to do that. I'm happy to do either way. While you do that, I can briefly describe kind of how it works. I'll probably time myself out here in a minute, but it's kind of like an MMDVM, like Jeff said. It's a little bit different. It's a small, self-contained device. A lot of you may or may not have seen it, but you can buy them for relatively inexpensively, and it'll handle right now pretty much all the major modes except for P25. So it'll do Fusion, DMR, and D-Star out of the box, and it has a lot of different options to be able to link into different things. Again, ranging from publicly available DMR to privately linking to different DMR systems, to privately, and there was my timeout, to privately linking in between each of those devices. So, obviously the cool thing there is, like Jeff said, from an EMCOMM perspective, if you need building-to-building or facility-to-facility comms without having to have massive broadcast traffic across a large geographic area, something like this would actually be really cool and almost perfect for the job. And we've been working on a number of ways to link them in with other homebrew systems, which is what the MMDVM would be considered. It actually, the protocol that allows them to talk to each other is actually called homebrew. I'm going to reset here, and let me know if you want me to switch over, Jeff.
I could, but I just realized I don't have, making sure I had it there. I realized that I don't have this radio wired up to the mixer that puts the audio on the stream, so unless you guys had DMR radios and could go to that talk group, it probably wouldn't do a lot of good. But we can demonstrate. I did just a test on there and have the dashboard up, so not that this is completely necessary for the mode, but it's a handy feature to have. Go ahead, Jake. You may continue if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure, not a problem. So, as I was saying, it's a multi-mode device, kind of like the MMDVM, which is the multi-mode digital voice modem. And it allows you to do largely the same things. One of the things that it doesn't do, that the MMDVM does do, is allow you to auto-select the mode that you're using. So the MMDVM, one benefit it has, and hopefully you can't hear too much Paw Patrol in the background. Mr. Blake is watching Paw Patrol next to me. The benefit it has is you can actually have it auto-select. Yeah, hold on, buddy. I'm going to let it reset here for a second. All right, so it actually does 20 milliwatts too, so not 10 but 20, which even double the power of what Jeff had stated does not give you a quantifiable amount of range. I can get about a half mile clear line of sight out of mine. I've tweaked the receive side quite a bit so that it's got a lot of gain, which unfortunately also reduces the linearity. That's a whole separate conversation if we want to talk about the front end of radio's linearity. But I think at a high level, that's kind of what it does. You just plug it into a network, log into it via a simple web UI, and define a number of different features that you can configure. One pretty neat thing, I'm going to reset here. One pretty neat thing that it does let you do that the MMDVM does not let you do is interop between modes, I guess is about the best way I can describe it. It's not actually transcoding anything, so you can use a system fusion radio and talk to other DMR radios on the DMR network, or vice versa. You could use a DMR radio, and if you wanted to talk on the C4FM system that Yaesu has set up out there, you could do that. And without getting into great detail, the reason for that is fairly straightforward. The protocol, the underlying protocols used, and the structure of the frames, the checksums, the type of voice encoding is the exact same between DMR and System Fusion. It's just a few simple field remappings that they have to do to allow you to do that, which is a pretty cool thing. So if you had that and you didn't have a DMR radio, but you had a Fusion, I had to reset there, you would then be able to get onto DMR with your Fusion radio, and of course vice versa. And we're working on some other pretty cool things that hopefully we'll be able to do with the linking stuff. That they're not ready yet, so I'm not going to completely let the cat out of the bag yet. But some pretty fun stuff that ideally will allow everybody to hear and use DMR in kind of a different way. Somewhere out there in the wide, wide world. Hi. Go ahead, Jeff. Enzo, PKT.
Thanks, Jay. K0GSB. As you were talking, I was demoing the automatic mode selection, I guess, if you will. I transmitted on D-Star. I'm not linked up to a D-Star reflector, but I transmitted on that, and I transmitted on DMR previously. So yes, it automatically switches for you, which is good and bad. Jeff, who's on the net tonight, KHATK, runs the Ham Nation D-Star after show net, and then there's another gentleman that runs the DMR net on a talk group called TAC 311, and I try to do both of them, but it's difficult. The way I have it set right now is the thing has to drop and be idle for like 20 seconds, and then it'll go into kind of a listening mode like it is right now, and then you can key up on whatever mode, and that one will become active. Only during a net, there's generally never 20 seconds of free time, and I can turn that down and adjust those settings, but it can be difficult to try to go back and forth between two different modes, especially if there's a lot of traffic. So when you throw that many more things in the mix, it can actually create issues for you as well. So qualify that. But let me pause. Anybody with any questions, comments, suggestions on hardware experience, anything, go ahead. Since we're really informal, just kind of jump in there. Okay, let me summarize real quick. I figured somebody would have a comment, but that's all right. We'll get those. Let me put that next to this. Put this next to that. So hardware, MMDVM, OpenSpot. If there's another one you prefer, somebody has one, you can mention it. These are just the two that I thought of right off the top of my head. So these two allow you to do multiple different modes. And their user interface is different, and they're the same but different. You can, and Jay and Mike and several others take a Shark RF OpenSpot, and there's a device you can buy that basically is a wireless client. So you connect the Ethernet cable from this to a device that gives you Wi-Fi access, and you program it for some SSIDs to the hotel's guest network, or the hotspot on your phone or whatever, and then it allows you to be completely portable, but you've got to, again, use commercial internet to do that. So from an EMCOMM perspective, these guys have some promise, depending on how they're used. The MMDVM, like Jay said, we're experimenting with some things, but the jury's still kind of out. Seeing good results, but not enough to really go into a whole diatribe about it. And then let's move into DMR. There's some DMR stuff. A lot of people, it's had a lot of metamorphoses, whatever, I guess. frequencies, there's two conversations that can actually happen simultaneously. And with a network connection, either via the internet or a local network, you can link these repeaters together and make them do different things. And then the amateurs got a hold of it, and they just used Motorola's, what they call IPsec Connect, and linked different systems together, generally over the internet. And then Ham did it here locally, but did it privately over a private microwave network. And we're using Motorola's linking technology to make that happen. Works fine. Ham's network is not a network that anybody can just connect into. It's a group of repeaters that are defined and authorized to be on that network in Colorado, New Mexico, and Wyoming. Shortly after that, there were a couple of different networks, mostly in California. There was one called DCI, and then there was a worldwide one called DMR-MARC. DMR, Motorola Amateur Radio Club, is what it stood for. And I think it's still around in some incantation somewhere, but those were similar networks, except they were worldwide linked on the internet. And then there may have been some other part of this history lesson, but we'll skip to kind of the end or present time. Brandmeister came along, and these guys wrote all this software, and I've got it up on the desktop here, so you can see it if you haven't ever. So Brandmeister allows anybody with an MMDVM or an open spot or whatever other device is out there to link that device with their network and then connect to the tons and tons of talk groups that are out there. I'm going to go to, if I can remember where it is, something they call hose line, and it really is just a graphical indication of all the traffic that's going on. You can listen to audio if you click on a particular talk group. Nothing is going to happen right now, apparently. So once you're connected up with Brandmeister, you can take and link to all of these different talk groups that are out there. And there are thousands of them, literally thousands. I want to do that. There we go. This is all the traffic that's going on there. 3100 is a nationwide group, and I'm just kind of calling off some of these 6-digit ones are basically just local talk groups, which is what we're using one of these to link ourselves together and not be associated. 3100 is huge. There are many, 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 many repeaters connected to this particular one at any given time. Then you can actually listen to the audio, and it archives all of the audio and things like that. But that's Brandmeister. So when you hear somebody talk about Brandmeister, this is what it is. It's a network that kind of binds all these things together, and anybody can. It's pretty open. You don't have to have authorization to. You have to be a ham, of course, but you don't have to have authorization to get in or wait for an email from somebody or allow you to be on the network. You just have to be a ham and get the device, and now you can talk around the world. Again, from an EMCOMM standpoint, I don't know that I really feel like this is a valid option, but it's we're talking digital stuff, and this is something that's really fun to play with, and it can be very useful if you're traveling. So definitely an option, and D-Star is a lot like that. Go here. Now there's some advantages to one versus the other, I guess I could say. Somewhere where it says, yeah, it's not. They automatically pulled it. There's a database on DMR that you register your call sign, and they give you. DMR is a commercial product, or at least it numerical ID. It's not a call sign. So what they do is they cross-reference your numerical ID to what's in the database, and it should be here, and it just shows you my call. Now the difference between that and D-Star and System Fusion is that when you transmit your call sign digitally. You do not do that on DMR. There have been a lot of misconceptions, and people think that your ID means that that's your call sign. It is not. It's a number. The FCC doesn't care anything about that number. But System Fusion and D-Star, because they were designed for amateur radio, every time you key the mic, your call sign is being sent. Legally, you don't even have to say your call sign because you're sending it digitally, which is kind of cool. I wish they, like I said, I wish they had a way to link those things off the public network, and it would be a lot handier. The problem is that there doesn't seem to be a radio that supports all of these modes. So, you know, it's either DMR, it's D-Star, it's Fusion. It can't get all three, can't get two. There was rumored to be one out there that did all four of these actually, and was an actual amateur radio, but they never indicated what the ballpark price would be, and I think I would probably be afraid to ask. Let me pause ID and see if anybody has any questions or anything. K0JSC.
OJW.
Go ahead, Dan.
I missed part of that last little bit there, Jeff. Had to check on the folks here, but concerning the Brandmeister, folks has been talking about quite a bit. Now, can you download that into your DMR radio, or do you use a computer for that? How's the best way to relate with the whole Brandmeister system?
Well, you have to reprogram the radio, and generally speaking, that would be done via computer, yes. And then you'd have to have a repeater in the area that supported Brandmeister, or an open spot, like we talked about the open spot, the MMDVM, Zum spot, those things. If you had one of those, you essentially have your own simplex repeater that gets you into that network and others, including D-Star and Yaesu System Fusion. So you have your own little hotspot that covers about a block, maybe not that far, and you can do it that way as well. But you still have to program the radio. You have to have the frequency correct, and then Brandmeister is interesting in the way it links, and I will link up one of the talk groups just for those that are watching the thing, and then I'll explain how it works. So stand by just a second. So your chunk to link these up, you go to a channel that you have pre-programmed with the correct frequency for your local machine, whether it be a repeater or a hotspot, and the correct talk group that you want to access, and you key the mic, and that actually links it up. That's what makes the link happen. And then depending on the system, it stays up for 15 minutes. If there's no local activity, it disconnects automatically for you. There are other ways to link it. I won't really go into those, but you do it from your Brandmeister dashboard, and you can statically link things that are disconnected all the time. The thing I don't like about the way you connect these things is that chunking is really not strictly legal. But the way it connects, as soon as you key up, it puts you on that talk group, and it puts you in that group of people. And if it was something like 3100, which I just connected to, that has traffic constantly, and you can see them. There's a chunk from one that's a 0.1 second, and there's one that's 0.5, and mine was 0.4. So those are for chunks. And if you were to legally do it and key up an ID, you would probably step basically, when you key up, the link doesn't happen until you actually unkey in the voice caller, which would make a lot more sense and allow you to legally ID and go from there. So anyway, kind of went off sideways on you a little bit, Dan, but my first 3 sentences, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. There's no, let's say, software that you can get it, say, and run it from your computer, like like you could, say, EchoLink or something like that.
There may be a hotspot, some kind of a hotspot out there that would allow you to do that. Jay, are you aware of anything? And then after you, Jay, throw it up. Maybe somebody else knows about it too. So throw it up in the air after that and see if anybody else has any info.
Yeah, unfortunately, I am not aware of any such thing that allows you to talk into Brandmeister that way. There may well be one, I just don't know about it. And yeah, like Jeff said, if anybody else knows of such an animal, go ahead and throw it up there. N0 PK.
Check for double. There is one for D-Star, Dan. I know that for sure. You could either get the little hotspot, the DVAP, or I can't remember what the other one was called that allowed you to do it with D-Star. And there may actually be a device out there that would allow you to do that. We're just not aware of it. But they're typically cheaper. I know the one for D-Star was a lot cheaper than the one that had a radio in it. I think the open spot is the one we were talking about that does all 4 of these modes. About $250.
Okay, JTK.
Good, Jeff.
Yeah, the one you're thinking of, and probably the closest thing to EchoLink, is going to be the D-Star DV dongle, DNGL. That is a little box that plugs up into the computer via USB, and then the software takes care of connecting everything. Your microphone on your computer is when you talk and does the transmitting, and then when you're receiving, it comes through your speakers. That's going to be the closest you're going to get to something like EchoLink. The DV4 Mini is similar in that software runs in your computer, but it's still a dongle and you need a radio for it. So there isn't really anything except for D-Star that'll do anything similar to EchoLink, like you use the computer microphone and speakers. Everything else is been developed through hotspots like Jeff is talking about here, the open spot, those kind of devices. So I think that's going to be the answer if you want to do something similar to EchoLink. KJTK.
Okay, there you go, Dan. And yeah, I hadn't heard anybody talking about one, and I haven't listened a lot lately, but it's plausible that somebody could develop some type of a device like that. Kind of the sky's the limit anymore. There are so many different people developing these things, and it started out with one, and then they just keep multiplying. Every time one comes out, there's a bunch more, and different things, and different variants, and you can even run different software packages to drive the things. The one that I'm using, there's 2 or 3 different software packages that, the next guy thought that he could do a better job or wanted to do it differently, so wrote his own. So there's a lot of development going on, and I suppose it's plausible in the future that something like that may come out. But otherwise, yeah, your choice is the open spot or something like a Zum spot. And I don't know if a Zum spot is cheaper than the open spot. If anybody has any info on, I haven't looked at the prices on any of these guys, so I know about what the open spot costs and kind of know what the MMDBM variants cost roughly. There's 3 or 4 of them though.
N0 PKT.
Good.
So depending on exactly, you know, how complex you want to make it, you can use that zoom spot with a Raspberry Pi, and yeah, I mean that's basically it, and then some software and build, you know, a little hotspot.
Okay. So back to you, Dan. Hopefully we answered your questions and gave you more information that that you need, or that you don't need. I don't know. K0JSC. I didn't transmit.
Okay, yeah, thank you, everybody. It is something to look at, and I was just looking at some different tools. Of course, I use the DMR rig, and I, you know, have someone program, you know, that up with the code plug. But the neat thing about the DMR, of course, is the new software for the TYT. It also spits back out in CW the channel number you're on and the channel name, which is absolutely beautiful. And apparently, you can get into the menus and play with it that way too. So, I may risk playing with the rig, because I guess if I really bollocks it up, I could always have someone, you know, reprogram it. But anyway, it is interesting. And just looking at some other different tools, I have some friends that are on D-Star and Fusion and that in different parts of the country, and it would be interesting to kind of see if that would be a useful communicative tool. And especially if I could use the computer, then I can have my screen readers tell me what's going on. Good deal, y'all. Thanks for the information, and we'll look at it too as time and a half goes along. Back to you there, Jeff, from W0OJW.
Okay, Dan. Yep, and that was swapping batteries, and I was down for a little bit, but I think I caught everything. Yeah, it's an interesting mode, and you know, DMR is interesting. All of the digital voice modes are interesting, especially that they allow you to link to faraway places. In fact, I've heard China more on there than, in fact, there's one right there on the dashboard, Chinese station transmitted. Heard China more on DMR than I sure have heard them on HF, where I'd rather hear them. But that's another story. So let's pause again. Questions, comments, anybody wanting to jump in and check in to indicate they're listening, anything like that, go ahead. Alright, so we've talked about D-Star, we've talked about DMR. We touched on System Fusion a little bit. So JF, you want to speak on that because you know more about it than I do. And you probably know whether it's usable locally. I mean, obviously all of these modes are usable on the same repeater. So, you know, you don't need internet linking for D-Star or DMR to talk to somebody on the same repeater, even if it is linked via the internet and the internet went away. You still talk locally. That's not a big deal. Like any other repeater, but some of the open spots may not be usable if there was an internet connectivity issue, and we kind of touched on that. But how does System Fusion fall into that, Jay, as far as you understand it right now?
So with Fusion, D-Star, and DMR, depending on how you link the open spots to one another, like if you directly link the open spots to one another, you can use those modes between the open spots. So if you have them linked over a private network, you should be able to use those modes to one another. I don't believe that you can. Well, the one thing you can't do, you can't cross mode with D-Star. That's one thing you can't do. You can cross mode with DMR and Fusion, but you can't cross mode with D-Star. It's just too different.
Okay, and I think Neil mentioned to me over the weekend that there are folks that use open spots over a mesh network. He had read that somewhere, that people were actually using the open spots over a mesh network, whichever mode they were using. I suppose it could have been any one of the four. And they were able to communicate over a mesh network. So kind of an interesting EMCOMM application for that. And again, it could be handy. If you didn't need a whole lot of coverage, you were in a shelter or in a command post or whatever, fill in the blank. And you had access to some network that was functional, whether it was a point-to-point network via microwave to somewhere else, or a mesh network that was either there or easy to deploy, and you needed communications to some other place and you didn't need to cover half the state. Maybe a usable device for, I guess, kind of a nominal amount of money, $250 for what it does is not bad.
This is the fun machine.
So that was what I kind of wanted to talk about regarding digital voice, even though there's a lot of other digital voice out there. These seem to be the three most prevalent. There's D-Star over HF. It's D-Star again, but it's over HF, which is kind of interesting. I've never had the opportunity to play with that. And then there was, for a time, and I don't know where that project went, there was a sound card mode where you could basically send digital voice over HF with a sound card and a piece of software, and I played with that way back and never really looked into that again. But digital voice over HF is pretty intriguing as well. I don't know if anybody's tried that, so if you have and you want to share an experience, go ahead.
KJTK has tried it. It's been a while since they've jumped on and used it, but it was a FreeDV, F-R-E-E-D-V, and it uses super narrow bandwidth over HF. If you're listening on sideband, it would sound like noise, but if you had FreeDV and if it was a FreeDV transmission, you would be able to pick up a conversation out of that. It's still being developed. Development seems to be going pretty slow, but it's still out there. KJTK.
Okay, Jeff, and as you were talking, I remember that rang that bell, FreeDV, and then I remembered AOR, which made the digital voice modem. And Universal Radio listed the initial version, which says discontinued and replaced by the ARD 9000 Mark II. And when I click on that one, it says it is also discontinued. And similar to the software that Jeff just spoke of, this was an actual piece of hardware that you wired into your transceiver, which made, I suppose, operation easier. But they were quite pricey. I don't see there's no even, it doesn't even tell me because they're discontinued what the price was. So I don't even know if these things are still around and if anybody uses them. But the advantage to this was it was a device that looks in size about the size of a signal link USB. And you just plugged it in your radio and plugged the mic in the front of it, and you didn't have any software to contend with. But they may not have been they may not be available anymore. They may have been cost prohibitive, and nothing happened with that. So yeah, so there's that as well. Something to talk about. And FreeDV would be a fun one to play with. Maybe we should try that some night.
KJTK with additional.
Go ahead, Jeff.
You know that those devices you were looking at were in the range of, I think, $500 or so. They were quite expensive, and that's probably the reason they didn't survive, because with FreeDV you essentially need two sound cards, one being the Signal Link USB, which is basically the modem between your radio and the computer, and then you also need like an internal sound card in your computer to do the transmitting and receiving of audio, so like a headset to transmit and receive audio. And I know the development has gone more towards the open source hardware, especially I think it was the HackRF and a couple devices in that STR range were being developed for FreeDV so that you could use it something similar on UHF, VHF, but I never really got into the details of it, but they were trying to develop more for the open source hardware, and that may be part of the reason that those devices were discontinued. But it's a nifty mode to work, and you get near crystal clear conversations over HF, and I think it's like a kilohertz or something, maybe even smaller than that. But it was quite narrow and quite impressive. But I think like you said, not too many people are using it anymore. KJTK.
Well, and if you guys have heard me talk about HF as it relates to emergency communications, you know, I don't ever want to dissuade anybody from trying HF and upgrading your license and getting on it, because I think all of us that do have a lot of fun on HF and the bands and working DX and being on nets and rag queuing and doing all that kind of stuff. But, you know, it can be challenging to run in some sort of an emergency communications ordeal over HF. Not all the time, but every now and then you might land on a frequency that somebody out there thinks belongs to him or her. I never heard any hers actually say that, but I've heard a lot of hims. So I'll just leave it at him and give you a ration about being on their frequency. We all know that's not the way it's supposed to be, but you can run into that from time to time. Or, you know, if you listen to the Maritime Mobile Service Net, which is a very great net that helps maritime vessels communicate and report their positions back, and they put it on a website so family members can track where a boat is or whatever. They handle traffic and things. And great net. I mean, they have a really public safety minded purpose, and people jam them all day long a lot of times. So there's bad actors out there, so I've always cringed at the thought of doing any ARES stuff, EMCOMM, ARES, whatever, on HF, unless it were WinLink, because, you know, generally you're not going to have to deal with that kind of stuff on WinLink. And again, I don't want to dissuade anybody from being on HF, because 99 times out of 100 you're going to have a fantastic experience. But you know, if you're trying to pass, you know, semi-critical traffic and you got somebody that doesn't want you there, it can be an issue. So it's typically my last resort. But digital voice over HF, whether it be D-Star or FreeDV or any of those, that kind of takes that whole dynamic away. And in fact, it seems like a while ago I read guys that were playing with FreeDV, and somebody was throwing a carrier right on top of them, trying to jam it, and they were able to just talk right over it. They didn't hear the carrier; they could just see that it was there, and the person jamming them got apparently no satisfaction because it didn't affect their QSO whatsoever. So it might be something to look at. You know, you've got to have a computer and stuff to run it, but it doesn't cost any money as long as you have a signal link. So let me pause here, I'll ID, and see if there are any comments. And we've been talking about this for an hour, so comments or closing comments, I guess, and we'll look at wrapping it up. K0JSC.
KC2VJW.
Go ahead, Ben.
So you've talked an awful lot about how with the internet linking, some of these might not be useful for EMCOMM. I'm just kind of curious if any of the digital voice modes have any simplex activity. around Denver or even southeast Colorado where you guys are. KC2BJW.
Well, I don't know. I can say that we've tried DMR on Simplex, and it actually works very well. Don't know that we've range tested it, but I think it can, in situations, probably many situations, be better than analog as far as the way it works on Simplex or even through a repeater. So, but I don't know that we've range tested it. That would be interesting to do a Simplex thing on one of the digital modes. I've not tested. I know that DMR works really well. Weak signal stuff, it does really good. I don't know if D-Star is comparable to that, or System Fusion, or the others. So that's what I know about it. Might be fun to try. Anybody else? Go ahead.
N0 PKT, double check. So I will say D-Star seems like it's fairly tolerant of a weak signal. I've done it a little over HF, just playing with it, and that was kind of interesting. I talked to a buddy in Georgia, and it was a situation where there was a ton of QSB, so and it wasn't a strong signal at best. So it worked reasonably well. But yeah, DMR would be an interesting thing to test at range. I will say I've talked to a couple of stations. They had to be kind of in the right spot. But I've talked to a couple of stations, Simplex, using System Fusion from my place in Black Forest down to Pueblo, which is going to be in the neighborhood of 60 miles as a crow flies, something to that effect.
We could always try that on a night. I'd have to, which wouldn't be terribly difficult for me to hook up a mobile to the base antenna, because I wouldn't be able to talk to anybody outside of town just because I live in a bowl, Canyon City, but there's mountains all around us, of course, hence the name, I suppose. But that might be interesting to try. I don't know if I'd hear you, Simplex, but maybe somebody in Pueblo could if they were equipped with some DMR. Maybe we can coordinate that. We'll have to work it out via email and pick the right night when everybody's ready to go. But it's a good question, Ben, and I know that the ARM ham code plug has a lot of Simplex frequencies in it already, and we've used it for events and things, kind of communicate locally. Ham fests and conventions and things like that, but yeah, we've never actually used it in that capacity, so it might be fun to try. Back to you, Ben. Go ahead, K0JSV.
Yeah, I doubt I have a Simplex pass to you guys, but it'd be cool to try and see how it works out. I have heard a little D-Star activity when I was traveling in Southern California, but I've never heard anything digital Simplex along the Front Range. Probably just don't know where to listen though, so that's always the thing to figure out. I don't know, be fun to try. KC2VJW.
Check out the ARM ham code plug, Ben. I think that most of the radios in Colorado, most of them are probably programmed with that code plug or some variant, and those are the generally accepted Simplex frequencies. The Brandmeister guys, I think, or DMR Mark had a code plug that had some Simplex frequencies that didn't necessarily comply with the band plan in Colorado. Frequency coordinator, I'm a little sensitive to that. So we would encourage people, it's not, of course, the law, but unless you're interfering with a repeater, but we would ask that people try to comply with the band plan, and the ARM ham code plug actually does a really nice job at that. So you might take a look at that and listen around the metro area. You may hear some traffic. Typically, it's a good practice to just use the all-call talk, timed out, the all-call talk group on Simplex instead of one of the other the all-call talk group is the highest number of available talk groups, and if you send an all-call transmission, anybody with a radio hears it. Even if they have a different talk group program, they may not be able to talk back. It's a pretty interesting feature of DMR, so you could be listening to, and that activity is not permitted on the RM ham system or probably any others. But as an example, please don't go out and try this, anyone. If you send an all-call over talk group 700, somebody's radio program with 700 would, or if you send an all-call on some repeater and everyone was listening to 700, they would still hear the all-call. And I think in the early days of DMR here in Colorado, that's what we were using, all-call, I want to say. And then we switched to just talk groups. So the Motorola or the DMR standards idea behind that was maybe for emergencies or something like that, or to hail everybody, even if you get this group on this repeater that was on this talk group, and there was this other group on the same repeater with this talk group, and this, there were 4 groups with different talk groups. And if you sent an all-call, everybody heard it. Didn't matter what talk group they were on. So I digress. Anyway, there you go. Try to put that on the calendar of things to check out. I've talked enough. Any closing comments or suggestions, anything like that, before we wrap it up? Call it a night. K0JSC. All right, I think we beat that horse to death properly. So appreciate everybody being here, and I'm sure there are a few lurkers out there. You folks are always welcome to check in. I won't put you on the spot, I swear, unless you have a question, and this is the place to ask. I don't know that any of us, anyone, even some of the ones that I would actually consider experts, claims to be an expert, even though there's at least a couple of folks on the net that participate that I would put in that category, but we're all kind of learning from each other, so chances are if you have a question, there may be somebody else or multiple people that are thinking the same thing, or will say, yeah, I wonder about that too. So we encourage interactivity here, so you don't have to listen to me talk all the time either. Hi. 7-3, everybody. Appreciate you being here. K0JSC.
Please key and wait 1 to 2 seconds.